Welcome to History According to Bob, the geography of Troy. I'm Professor Bob, and I will be your guide through this particular topic. The Iliad, of course, is the famous book of the war with the Trojans, although it does not end with the horse. That's in the Odyssey. But it, of course, is the book that triggered Heinrich Schliemann to begin to search for the Trojan city later on in his life. So it's only appropriate to have it in this particular picture. There is myself. I am at Troy. My wife took this picture. It's about 20 pounds ago. And ultimately, as I go through a whole series of these shows on Troy, we'll eventually walk the site. The area, with all the different groups of people, this would have been the Bronze Age period. The Mycenaeans in Greece, the Minoans in Crete, the Hittites in Asia Minor, Egyptians, and then, of course, the Levant, which would have been Palestine, Syria area. The lands of the Dardanelles Strait, the Sea of Marmara, and Edremit Bay were in ancient times known as the Troad, or Troas. Modern archaeologists have since discovered all sorts of ancient sites, in particular the corner of Asia Minor. Most important of these being Troy, which either took its name from the area or gave its name to the region. It is possible that this well-known and strategically located ancient settlement, mentioned in the Iliad as the Troia, Ilion, or Ilios, may have taken its name from two kings, Tros or Ilos. But we certainly know that the area is set off by the word the Hellespont, which is the opening where the Dardanelles Straits go out into the Aegean Sea. And this is a bustling trade area today, and it was a really bustling trade area in ancient times. And that's one of the reasons for the importance of the city. Now you note that it has a nice bay, and it's going to be the last bay before you start your treacherous journey up the Dardanelles Straits into the Black Sea and the Sea of Marmara. But there is a current that flows out of the Black Sea into the Aegean. And so the wind is particularly important. You're going to try and get through that area at certain times of the year. The prevailing winds blow to the northeast. And you'll notice that the strongest winds are in the spring, where you get 50% of the time a 3 to 10 mile an hour wind. In the summer, it drops down to 40% of 3 to 10 miles an hour. In the fall, 20%, 3 to 10 miles per hour. In the winter, just 25%. So in the fall and the winter is the most difficult time to go up the direction towards the Black Sea. Of course, coming home, it makes it a very simple. If the wind's not blowing properly, you need a place to wait until it is in the right position. So a harbor works out well. You'll notice the choke point, the narrowest spot, is what is now the modern city of Kankakee, which is why Xerxes built his pontoon bridge to march his army across. It is also the site where Alexander crossed from Europe into Asia. It's a beautiful place to cross. There's a little town on one side. You leave the town on a ferry, and when you get out into the middle, and it depends on the day. It was kind of a foggy day, so we didn't quite get a really clear shot of the Hellespont. You can see it's pretty far up. And then you come into the modern city of Kankakee. And if you go to the harbor area in Kankakee, the Trojan horse that was used in the movie was put there, and so you can go and visit it. But a closer view of the topography, as it's believed to have looked at the time of the Trojan War, or at least the Bronze Age, you see quite a significant area of safety for ships. You also see the rivers that are flowing into the bay, which is the ultimate reason why there's no harbor today. It's gone. This was something that was very difficult for the ancients to do, to keep cleaning the harbors out. For example, Macedonia, the capital of Pella, was one time an outlet to the sea, but it had 5 rivers that silted it up. If you go to visit Ephesus, you'll see the old boggy harbor, but the sea is 1.5 miles away. And that is going to be a real problem, particularly for the early archaeologists, and Schliemann in particular. Now, Heinrich Schliemann, multi-millionaire, probably would have been a billionaire by our modern standards. At the age of 40, he'd been around the world. He had learned multiple languages. He was bored to death. And then he remembered his childhood when his father had given him the illustrated copy of the Iliad. Now, we have to be careful with that interpretation. It doesn't mean he received an illustrated comic book or a book that was all illustrated. It was a book that had illustrations every so often in the book. And he is going to start taking his money and try to prove that that actually existed. The picture that you see also shows where he's buried. That is his tomb. The picture that Schliemann would have had in his mind, a very large city on a bay with a river, and then there's a peninsula where the Greeks would have landed and used that on the opposite side to beach their ships, to build their camp while they besieged the city of Troy, or at least attacked the city of Troy. So his view from the bay would have been what you see in this artistic rendering here of the big city, the big fort on a hill overlooking the bay. And he goes to the area and he's looking for Troy. And there's any number of people that suggested where it was, but everybody was kind of, where is the bay? And it's been silted up. So in reality, the view that you saw in the artwork is the view that you actually see here, where it's on the plain. We would have been in the harbor at ancient times, but that's where it is. In addition, it's not a big, gigantic Acropolis like you see in Athens or at Mycenae. So Schliemann is a little concerned about this. And eventually, he'll end up digging up a whole series of cities. This particular chart showing where the Greek camp would have been, the marshes around the area, where the rivers come together. Now, if you go into the city and you go all the way up to its high point, the view of that harbor is what you see here. These are two shots from up on the top, looking towards the peninsula and then looking towards where the Helmsbont is. And when you come into the site, you see this monument, this little marker, Ilos or Wilusa. Now, Wilusa is a term that the Hittites used. There is actually a book that is considered to be older than the Iliad in Luvian, which is a Hittite language, and it talks of a great war, and they use the term Wilusa. Later on in several shows, I'm going to talk about some new discoveries in Hittite works and documents on this particular area. Because there's always been the theory that this area was powerful enough money-wise that they were able to separate away, so there's a lot of discussion there. Now, what does this city look like? One of the biggest problems that we have is we're always digging up the palaces first and not worrying about the rest of the city. And I don't know how many times I've talked to people who have traveled and they'll go, well, we went to Troy, but there really wasn't anything there. How a big battle for 10 years, that little bitty site. But as you can see from the artist's rendition, that's the main citadel. That's where the king would have been. That would have been the palace. It's just like Mycenae. That is not the whole city. That is the center of the government. The city, the trade city, then spreads out away from it. We never really like to dig that up. So it would have been much larger. And here's an aerial view of the site today. And you can see it's relatively small. It doesn't take too long. We were there 4 hours, wandering around, following the markers. And we'll eventually look at each settlement, what we can see of each settlement. But this is the excavation that has gone on since, showing how far away the rest of the city was in relationship to that picture with just the citadel. So it is a lot bigger. So we'll be looking at the different layers later on. The sources for this, as you can see, one of the sources is a revived edition of Troy by Askin. Another source from the Osprey Men-at-Arms series is Troy 1700 to 1250 BC by Fields. The Guide to Troia and Wilusa by Korfman is really good. This is a book that you'll find on the site and was recommended by the guide that we had on the tour. And then one of the most interesting books, and this has been quite a while ago that this was made, the In Search of Troy, In Search of the Trojan War by Wood. Does really, really, really good work. And he did a BBC series on that book. So there's some interesting material from that. So if you go to historyaccordingtobob.com, I do podcasts 6 days a week that are free. You can pick them up there. You can subscribe there. And if you like what we're doing here, feel free to go by the website and donate and sign up or pick up a CD. So I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you very much.